In most monster movies, we usually see the movie from a high perspective to get a better impression of the ongoing action. These shots give the audience a godlike view, emphasizing the creature's monumental impact. During these fights, we usually don't see what's happening with the people on the ground, and that's understandable because no one cares at that moment. Audiences go to the movies to see giant monsters fight, and that's all we want. However, fact is that thousands of people die on the ground. People get killed, injured, displaced. Focusing heavily on ground-level human suffering would often change the atmosphere of the film from an action-driven spectacle to a horror tragedy, which the Legendary Monsterverse is not intended to be. Godzilla, the Mutos, and other titans have killed thousands of people and caused billions of dollars in damage. I've attempted to provide an estimate of damage costs and casualties, including people who were killed, injured, and displaced. Important to mention for this video, these figures are not confirmed numbers but only estimates I tried to make based on available information, so please don't be mad if I'm wrong with some numbers. Let's begin. Godzilla 2014. We get to see the first Titan battle in Hawaii. The male Muto was on a rampage in Honolulu and eventually Godzilla arrived and they got caught up in a battle. But before that, Godzilla's arrival causes a massive tsunami which floods coastal areas and destroys buildings near the shore. The main impact zone in this battle was the airport and its surrounding areas, like downtown Honolulu and Waikiki. In the movie, we see helicopters flying soldiers onto rooftops taking positions. One of these buildings is the Hilton Hotel. Later we see the flood passing the Grand Hotel and the soldiers opening fire at Godzilla shortly afterwards. Both hotels are located around here. This means Godzilla first made land here at this location and made his entire way from here to the airport, where the male Muto was waiting. During Godzilla's walk, he probably destroyed everything in his path. Also, Godzilla's tsunami was so powerful that it even reached the airport. Honolulu has a population of over 350,000 people in 2014. The Titan activity that night was around this area. Now, based on all this information, we can try to find out the victim numbers. As you can see, I've provided this estimation chart where we see the best, moderate and worst case number of victims. Now, these are the figures for Hawaii. The number of casualties is at best 180,000 and can reach even 500,000 in the worst case scenario. The next morning we see the devastation the Titans have caused. Downtown Honolulu and Waikiki suffered the most damage, as well as the airport. Also affected were areas destroyed by Godzilla's tsunami. Therefore, let's take a look at the damage costs. These could range from 100 billion to about $380 billion. Let's talk about Las Vegas. Now for Vegas it was difficult to make an estimate of victim numbers because we don't have a lot of footage. The Muto didn't stay in Vegas but reducing overall casualties compared to a prolonged battle. In 2014, Las Vegas had a population of 2.3 million people. We shall now consider the victims. In the best case 190 to 260,000 and in the worst case maybe over 900,000 victims. Nevertheless, the numbers could also be too high, as the Muto was just simply moving in a straight line through the city. Now let's take a look at the damage costs. The Las Vegas Strip and central areas suffered the worst damage, while outlying regions were spared. Therefore, the damage cost for Vegas can range from $42 billion to $220 billion. The female Muto had no wings and therefore had to walk the entire way from Vegas to San Francisco. Areas between Vegas and San Francisco include sparsely populated desert regions with mountains, as well as more densely populated areas near cities. Rural areas might see fewer victims, but towns and smaller cities like Barstow or Bakersfield would add casualties. Approximately 10,000 to 50,000 and in the worst case 350,000 to over 450,000. Apart from that, the constant EMP makes it hard to track the Muto's position, making it harder to predict which city will be hit next. While the Muto made its way from Vegas to San Francisco, we see on TV that the military tries to evacuate areas in California and Nevada, and especially cities along the coastline, like Sierra. When it comes to the damage costs, the amount ranges from 150 billion to over $780 billion. Now, let's talk about San Francisco. Even though the city was the main location of the battle, the destruction did not impact the entire city. Here you see a map of San Francisco. And these are the areas that were affected by the battle. In 2014, San Francisco had a population of 830,000 people, with about 300,000 inhabiting these areas. Since the military had already predicted that Titans would meet in San Francisco, there was still time to evacuate some people, but not all of them. Mewtwo's EMP disabled all electronic means of escape, so there was still a great number of people who didn't make it out of the city and therefore had to survive the battle on their own. Now let's talk about the victims. Victim numbers can range from 80 to probably 300,000. If we now summarize the total victim numbers of Godzilla 2014, we get a result of 460,000 to over 2 million people. In later movies and TV shows, we learned that San Francisco, just like Vegas, was not rebuilt after the battle. In terms of damage, I would estimate that the battle resulted in costs ranging from $250 billion to even maybe over 800 billion in worst case. And now finally, the total damage costs of Godzilla 2014. Numbers are extremely high, ranging from 432 billion to over $2.80 trillion. Godzilla 2 King of the Monsters. In the sequel movie of 2019, eco-terrorists have tried to awaken all the Titans with the help of Dr. Emma Russell in order to restore balance on Earth. However, that didn't work as well as expected. When they awakened King Ghidorah, he took control of all the Titans and made them devastate the world. Luckily, with the help of Monarch, Godzilla was there to stop Monster Zero. However, the Titan attacks took place all over the world. Monarch and global authorities struggled to respond to the sudden mass awakening. On every continent, the Titans triggered earthquakes, wildfires, tsunamis, and disasters that don't even have names. In the novelization, it was mentioned that civilians in affected areas were often left to fend for themselves, as government and military forces were overwhelmed by the global crisis. Many organized evacuations were therefore unable to be carried out successfully, which made it difficult for many people to escape in time. The best example is Washington DC. The flooding and destruction caused by Ghidorah's storm were sudden and unpredictable, indicating that Washington was not fully evacuated and many residents likely remained trapped in the city and left to die. Since the Titan attacks took place all over the world, mostly off-screen, it is in fact impossible to determine the number of dead and injured. But I tried. Here I have the estimates of the victims on a global scale caused by the mass awakening. They range from 1.7 billion people to over 2 billion, and it could probably even be more as we have no precise information. Estimating the costs of damage is also challenging as we still lack information about all the cities that were targeted, but here is the cost estimate. They can range from 25 trillion to maybe over $50 trillion. Godzilla vs. Kong. In Godzilla vs. Kong, both Titans encounter in Hong Kong and fight for the title of Alpha Titan. However, when Mechagodzilla appears, the two Titans join forces and defeat him together. So, Hong Kong became the main location of Titan destruction in this movie. Since we want to approach the matter as precisely as possible, I will show you exactly where the location is. This is the map of Hong Kong. In fact, all of this is Hong Kong. However, the area is still divided into 4 regions. First we got the Kowloon Peninsula, then there are the so-called New Territories, then there's Lantau Island, and last but not least the most important location, Hong Kong Island. This is the place where the main battle between Godzilla and Kong took place. In 2024, Hong Kong Island has a population of 1.2 million people. So, in the initial phase, Godzilla made land in Hong Kong and went on a rampage, destroying bridges and Bay Area buildings. He also used his atomic blast that destroyed infrastructure all around. So here is the estimate of the number of the dead, injured and displaced. However, the worst case is probably exaggerated. Now, the main battle between Godzilla and Kong was pure destruction. They threw each other against buildings, made skyscrapers collapse, Kong jumped from one house and high-rise to another, Godzilla used his atomic breath. I think you know what I'm getting at. Now, these are the numbers for the main battle. They range from 350,000 to probably over 850,000. On the next morning, Mechagodzilla broke out of the Apex facility and he was even more destructive than Godzilla or Kong individually. While he's walking through the streets, we can still see some people around. Mechagodzilla's laser beams were probably so devastating that they even may have blown up a few bunkers. Since there have already been many dead and injured that night, it's hard to say how many people are left in safety and how many are not. Nevertheless, here is another estimate for the mecha casualties. Now, if we add up all these figures, we arrive at the total number of victims. They range from 388,000 to about 1 million. However, this estimate was for Hong Kong Island only, where the main battle occurred. But since Hong Kong Island is actually one city, I would also like to give an estimate for that, because it is possible that there was destruction somewhere else as well. As we know, when Godzilla first arrived in Hong Kong, he crashed a bridge and made it collapse. And this bridge is the Stone Cottage Bridge, which is located right here at the docks. However, this bridge is not situated at Hong Kong Island, but on the mainland. This means Godzilla probably walked all the way from the bridge across some inhabited areas to reach the city, causing more victims. Therefore, I want to try to display the estimate for all of Hong Kong, as Hong Kong is not just made up of this island. Entire Hong Kong has a population of 7.5 million people, plus around 160,000 tourists present each day. There is still one more thing we need to keep in mind. In the film, we learned that the city was in fact evacuated, even if a bit late. So, if 70 to 80% of all the people in Hong Kong were evacuated successfully, we can estimate that 5.25 to 6 million people survived. If the remaining 20 to 30% of the people couldn't be evacuated in time, we can estimate that 1.5 to 2.25 million people became victims. In a really bad case, the figure could be higher, perhaps even 3 million. Okay, now let's take a look at the damage costs. In the best case, they could range from 200 to 500 billion, or even over $1.5 trillion. Godzilla x Kong. In Godzilla x Kong, Ska King and his monster Shimu rise to conquer the surface, leading to a massive battle in Rio de Janeiro. In the end, Godzilla and Kong team up once again to defeat the threat and save the world. As in Hong Kong, there's also a new wave of destruction in Rio. However, the Battle of Rio is a complicated matter as the areas of combat change. With Google Earth, I tried to track the location where the battle began, and indeed, I made it. As you can see, this image comparison shows the exact place where Shimu and the other titans first appeared. And this area is Copacabana Beach, which is located here on the map. However, in the course of the battle, we suddenly find ourselves here in El Centro, downtown Rio, which some buildings show during the battle. This means that the battle must have stretched its entire way from Copacabana to the center of Rio off screen, and who knows what destruction was caused. The area between Copacabana Beach and downtown is separated by mountainous terrain, making it hard to move quickly for the titans. The titans would have mostly been forced to fight along the shoreline in order to reach downtown Rio. The location movement can simply be described as a movie mistake, as the producers knew that no one cares and no one would question it, as the people just want to see the battle, but let's pretend it's not a mistake. However, the sudden location change made it difficult to identify the affected areas from Copacabana to downtown Rio. I've tried to determine the affected areas and the number of people living there. We now take a look at the number of the dead, injured and displaced people. It ranges from 700,000 to over 1 million. Now, let's take a look at the costs and damage. If we combine the costs of all areas that were affected, we get amounts in the trillions. However, one thing is unclear. In King of the Monsters, we see Behemoth destroying Rio de Janeiro. However, in Godzilla x Kong, the city seems to be fine. King of the Monsters takes place in 2019 and Godzilla x Kong in 2027. 9 years is apparently enough to rebuild the city, but it is also possible that I'm completely wrong about all the damage costs. In the new Godzilla x Kong Supernova teaser, we see a Monarch office with multiple screens. One of them displays a news report stating Rio has completed its multi-billion-dollar rebuild. It's hard for me to believe that the total damage costs amount to only billions. It must surely be a much higher amount. Later in the film, we see Kong and Godzilla once again getting into a fight in Egypt. Kong is about to lose the fight, but luckily Gia and Mothra appear in the last second, convincing Godzilla that Kong isn't his enemy, and they join forces. Now, we see Godzilla running straight through Giza City to reach the pyramids. It is really hard to give numbers, as we only have 2 to 3 scenes with no clear view at the impact zone. The only clue we have is the Cairo Tower in the background of this scene. The Cairo Tower is located right here on the map at the Nile River alongside Giza City. Based on this information, we can estimate that Godzilla emerged from the Nile River at this point and ran straight through Giza City to the pyramids. Giza City has a population of around 4.5 to 5 million people. As there was no fighting in the city itself, we can decimate the number of victims. Since Godzilla ran in a straight line, many homes were spared from destruction. Now, the victim numbers for Cairo. As you can see, it could be about 40,000 people, but in the worst case also over 500,000 victims. Hong Kong and Rio de Janeiro, with their denser infrastructure, higher property values and greater economic activity, would face much higher reconstruction costs compared to Cairo. Therefore, when it comes to the damage costs, they could be about 25 billion, but in the worst case scenario also over $80 billion. In the opening of the movie, we see Titansilla on a rampage in Rome. Luckily, Godzilla shows up in time time and stops him. Unlike other battles, this was short-lived, but some smaller parts of Rome are somewhat destroyed. The affected areas were likely central Rome, including parts of the historic district. Godzilla also used the Tiber River as his way in and out of the city, avoiding citywide destruction. The estimates of the victims in Rome are therefore not so high. They can range from 20 to 90,000 up to 240,000 people. Now, let's take a look at the damage costs of Rome. Several districts were affected and historical sites were damaged, requiring special restoration measures. Now, I'll show you the total victim numbers and costs of Godzilla X Kong. If we add up the victims of Rio, Cairo and Rome, we receive these numbers. The numbers are relatively high and they're about to reach 1.7 million. Now let's check the total damage costs of Godzilla X Kong. If we add up the costs and damage, we get these numbers. They are truly enormous and inconceivable amounts. Nevertheless, the numbers could be even higher. In the novelization of Godzilla X Kong: The New Empire, we learn that before the opening battle in Rome, Scylla first made land in India, devastating the Kudankulam nuclear power plant to feed on radiation. She then moved through Pakistan and Iran, where she obliterated a nuclear facility. She continued across Azerbaijan, swam the Black Sea, and rampaged through Ukraine and Poland. In Berlin, she caused chaos. From there, she swam to the UK to consume radiation from an uranium pellet plant in Preston, until she finally reached Rome via an unmentioned route. However, I did not take into account the victims and costs incurred. And now, I would like to present the total victim numbers and damage costs from all 4 movies combined. Let's take a look at the victim numbers first. Here you see the numbers of casualties of each movie. The human casualties are high and are already in the billions, but the total numbers are even more shocking. The numbers range from 1.701 billion in best case to probably even 2.804 billion in the worst case scenario. In 2024, the world had a population of 8.162 billion people. If we take this figure and subtract it from the number of dead, injured and displaced in the Monsterverse, we are left with 5.358 billion people unaffected by Titans. And now finally, let's check out the damage costs. These are the damage costs of each movie and they're extremely high. But even worse are the total numbers. They range from $1.790 trillion to about 57.460 trillion. So, when we look at these numbers, it only makes sense that the world hates Titans. In case you should still be here, that's it for this video. Thank you guys for watching.